And I could go piece by piece and element by element, but politics is only an aftershock of what happens in the culture. And far too many Christians, if I may say, are a little bit passive about getting involved in the political. They'll say, well, Charlie, there is no evidence or there is no biblical example of getting involved in politics. And I challenge them. I say, well, yes, if you remove Esther, Mordecai, Nehemiah, Jeremiah, Daniel, Joseph, Moses, then there's nothing political in the Bible. We as Christians are called to be counselors to the king. We are called to bring biblical truths into the public arena. As Christ our Lord said, to be salt and light. What do salt and light have in common? They change the environment that they come in contact with. You should try to make Texas A&M more Christ-like. You should try to fight for the unborn. You should try to fight that people save themselves from marriage. You should try to constantly try to make the unbelievers believe in Jesus, to change the environment that you come in contact with. Mind you, Christ did not tell us to look more like the environment that we come in contact with. We're supposed to be the change agents. And that goes with your local city council, that goes with your state government, and that goes with your national government. As it says in Jeremiah 29:7, demand the welfare of the nation that you are in because your welfare is tied to your nation's welfare. We are called to care about the peace of the country that we are in. Daniel fasted and prayed for the nation that he was in before he was thrown into the lion's den, to contest for values that we so care about in the public square and in the public arena. And the failure to do that, if I may say so, is bad for everybody. And even an honest atheist, and I think I didn't quite get Bill Maher there. He was not exactly in agreement here, but it's a conversation worth continuing with him because I think he wants to get to this conclusion, which is that even an honest atheist might not believe in God, but can recognize and notice that a society that does not believe in God is bad for even atheists. And that is the necessity of believing in God is one that must be talked about more. Because the moral chaos and the moral confusion, at some point you have to discuss, what are you going to teach your kids? By what moral standard? And if all of a sudden you're saying, well, I'm going to just teach my kids what the New York Times says, that's a bad answer. Or I'm going to just, whatever my teacher wants, that is a bad answer. Instead, you need something to appeal to. At all points, you will hear people say, well, that's good, or that's bad, or that's evil, or that's wrong. And your answer should always be, by what standard? Just so we know that we can, basically judge the same thing, that we can have the same idea of what we are appealing to. The final point I'll make is this, and then we'll open it up for some questions, is that we as Christians, I think at this moment in time, must be unafraid to not just share our faith, but to see where our faith overlays with political engagement and involvement, and understand politics is not the most important thing. Jesus is the most important thing. And therefore, and I'll say that again, the most important thing is Jesus, but what is the second most important thing? To make sure you could do the first thing, to make sure we still have religious liberty, and to make sure we live in a free society. A free society is awesome for the gospel. A free society is good for all people, for poor people, for marginalized people, for people that, quite honestly, want to be able to get ahead. And at its core and at its foundation, we as Christians should not be saying, looks like the rapture's coming this next Thursday. I'm about to get zapped up. No. Bad. You might be right. I'm not going to get into that. You might be wrong. I'm not going to get into that. Instead, you should have a belief system. How am I going to make this country, how am I going to make this campus more ready for Christ's return? How am I going to fight evil? In Psalm 97:10, it says, those of you who love God, it's in the command form, those of you who love God, you must hate evil. That is in the command form, to hate it. And by the way, we should be able to say what evil is. And in America, evil is butchering babies while they are still in utero and calling it healthcare. That is not glorifying of God. It is telling a 16-year-old that you might be another gender because you might be going through a difficult patch in your puberty. That is evil, everybody. It's also evil simultaneously to allow the border to be completely wide open. The Bible explicitly effuses the idea of nations, of borders, of boundaries of a nation. And it creates moral chaos, not to mention the terrible exploitation of women and children that happened on the southern border over the last 4 years of sex trafficking, all the associated things. And so it is tempting as Christians, and you're here tonight to your great credit, but I want to reinforce this. There'll be moments where people will tell you, no, stop being political, just be a Christian. You should say, you know what, I'm being biblical. not political. Because I'm called to get into the tough fights, to make that place more Christian, to make the government more glorifying God. And look, it's very difficult. There's so much wretchedness and nonsense that infuses our government. But the other alternative is this. Is the alternative just like we should retreat from the public square, run to the hills, and just kind of live in our own homeschool communities, which I support, by the way, to raise children, but I love homeschooling, but to have no contact with the outside world. And here is the balance. We need to be in the world, but not of the world. And my contention is that the last 20 years, Christians have forsaken the public square because it wasn't easy and it was not comfortable. Christ said, on this rock, build my church. Catholics in this audience will have a different interpretation of that. That's fine. The word is ecclesia, which literally means build my public gathering place, build my civic center of meeting. No matter how you interpret it, we can all agree that we should try to bring the truths of the scriptures to every domain and dimension imaginable. We should not force it upon people, but that's the final thing, is that although you might believe we have separation of church and state, a little more complicated than that, nobody believes, including Bill Maher to his credit, we have separation of morality and state. And therefore, it begs the question, by what standard do you say that is good? By what standard do you say that is evil? We have the answer that has been unchanged. We believe it's breathed out of the scriptures, and as true today as it was 2,000 years ago. The liberals have no alternative, and I encourage all of us that are believers to keep on bringing that into the public square for the remainder of our life.